Hello, and welcome to UPLINK TV. My name is Terry Taylor.
And I'm George Portugal.
And today we're about to talk about the second generation of video game consoles.
Yeah, so the second generation of video game consoles is really when, these things got into our homes in a big way for the first time. So, if you wanted to play video games in the mid-'70s, the place to go was the arcade, and there were home Pong arcades that had come into the living room, and that sold very well and got people very excited.
Yeah, this was attempting to bring the full video game arcade experience into your living room.
That's right.
And it's amazing the technology that was created for its time. Should we talk about the Fairchild?
Yeah, Channel F. Yeah, that's right. So the Fairchild Channel F is a system that people don't know too well. It's the very first video game console that uses cartridges. And so those were developed by an engineer named Jerry Lawson. He's one of the first African-American developers for video games. And so, yeah, they kind of look like these really large cartridges like this, and they usually have multiple games on them. And the Fairchild is also pretty well known for this unique controller interface that has these upward and downward potentiometers and these left-right ones as well.
The strange thing being is there was no standard for what a controller would be.
That's right. This generation is really known for a lot of experimentation. So, and you can really just see that here on the table. So, you had interesting looking controllers like this, you had things that looked like joysticks, and then you had things that looked more like telephones. And, I think that one of the things that the developers of these consoles were trying to do was to give people something that they knew, that they were comfortable with. And a push-button telephone was something that was coming into existence during that time.
Correct. We were just coming through like the rotary era. Not only that, it was perfect for overlays.
Yeah, that's right. So you could get lots of different control functions, and you could put an overlay in for each game. That's something that the ColecoVision and the Intellivision did.
Let's talk about hardware.
Sure. So a lot of these systems use a similar kind of architecture. So they're 8-bit consoles. They have processors like the Zilog Z80 or the 6502 processor. Some of them have proprietary chips, like the Fairchild definitely does. And then others, like the Atari 2600, is mostly using off-the-shelf parts. And that actually got them into some kind of trouble over time, because other competitors, like the ColecoVision, they developed hardware modules that allowed you to play your Atari 2600 games on the ColecoVision, and
which is an insane thing to think about. That's like being able to play Xbox games on a PlayStation.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that would never happen now without massive lawsuits.
Yeah.
But because this thing was made with mostly, off-the-shelf parts, they were able to, get it onto this hardware as well.
It's unbelievable that was something that was. I mean, it was unprecedented at that point. Any of this.
Yeah.
So the fact that they were doing that shows where their focus was.
Yeah.
To bring really the best at-home arcade experience to your house.
Yeah, that's right. And this was also a time of a lot of experimentation. I mean, not just with controllers and with accessories, but with games too. So some things were just straight up ports of arcade games, and then there are other games, especially for the Atari 2600, that are just so strange, you can't even believe it. When video games became a huge success, literally every company you could imagine was trying to cash in, and so you could, put in mail-ins to Purina Dog Chow, and you'd get a game.
Yeah. Kool-Aid had a game. Everybody had a game for this thing.
Yeah, and that actually ended up being the demise of this generation of hardware. So there were, so many different consoles. There were so many different games coming out. Nobody knew what was good, what was bad. It was all the same price. And at least in North America, people got sick of it. And then it just ended up imploding in on itself. And in North America, by 1983, video games were passé. People thought it was a fad.
Yeah, they thought it was a fad that would die. And the funny thing is, the video game crash was something that really was just a North American thing.
That's right.
Yeah, that in Europe they don't even know what that means.
No, and certainly not in Japan too. But here that was really kind of the circumstances that the market was in. And yeah, but of course we got out of that, and video games are still very much here to this day.
But let's talk about the forward-thinking innovation that went into some of these consoles, and some of the accessories and whatnot, like voice and whatnot. They were really pushing the boundaries of what this unknown realm was of home video gaming.
That's right. There are some accessories for the Intellivision in particular, where there's like a voice synthesis module where they were experimenting with trying to replicate human voice with a digital module. That was very new. That's like the very great ancestor of Siri and Alexa.
Correct. And as you spoke about before, they were putting voice into systems and cross compatibility
between consoles.
Yeah,
that's right. There's a modem for the Atari 2600, which is crazy.
And wireless controllers,
that's
the
right.
first ones.
The first wireless controllers, right, for the 2600.
Which essentially worked the same way like old school like walkie-talkies did.
Using radio waves to transmit the data over to the receiver.
Which is an unbelievable thing to think about at this period of time.
That's right. And before I forget, like this generation of consoles was the first to actually have something handheld. And so these are Nintendo Game & Watches. And so the developer of the Game & Watch is a man named Gunpei Yokoi, and
very important dude.
Yeah, you'll hear more about him later on in the future generations of video game consoles because he's the guy who developed the Nintendo Game Boy. What's also really notable about these games is, they have some similarities to the Game Boy. So they have like a reflective matrix screen here, and I don't happen to have one here today, but there are some versions of this which have a D-pad, and this is like the first instance of a D-pad in a video game console, and then of course that just took off.
Yeah, that became the mainstay. What's interesting to note about these is that these were based off of the fact that Gunpei Yokoi saw businessmen playing essentially rudimentary games on their calculators.
Yeah, that's right. He was, I think, on some long, I forgot where he was going, but he was on some long flight.
Yeah.
That's right, and he saw some businessman playing a game on a pocket calculator in the airport, and then just thought, like, why can't we take these ideas and make them handheld? And these proved to be very popular in Europe and the United States and
Japan,
for
sure.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, there are even some instances where some of them are two-player and they have controllers that
detachable
actually,
controllers. That's right. And they survived a really long time, like even well into the success of the Game Boy, when you would think, like, why would you play this one game on this this kind of crappy looking screen, and they went until, like, I think about the early 90s. So.
Yeah, I mean, and that had to lead over into the handhelds we'll talk about later, the Tiger and whatnot, but that's essentially the same technology.
Yeah,
just liquid crystal display gaming.
Displays. Yeah, that's right. So if you guys go out there and you're searching for one of these older second-gen consoles, one of the real challenges to using them is, like, how do I connect this up to a modern television? So if you're looking at these, they all come with these RF connections, and the video quality on this is poor. A lot of TVs can't even connect up to this anymore. And so, the question is, how do you enjoy this stuff if you can't connect it to a TV? So thankfully nowadays, we do have ways of connecting them to a modern display. So many of these consoles have mods that allow you to upgrade with composite video or S-video, or sometimes even RGB, which is the highest quality analog video possible. And then from there, you get like a really nice experience.
So let's talk about how you do a mod like this to one of these generation systems. Are you wiring straight into the board?
Yeah, so it really depends. Thankfully, because these circuits are simple by modern standards, the modifications needed are not that bad. Sometimes you're just pulling out a chip and then putting in like a daughter board that interfaces between the original hardware and the chip.
And you just solder it in.
Yeah, and sometimes you're just wiring in like a very basic, like these composite mods that we have on some of these consoles. It's just like a very basic circuit that you're attaching, they're not that bad.
That's incredible. We should talk about the fact that the 5200 was the first. Let's not talk about how much the controller itself is garbage.
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
It's absolutely terrible.
But it was the first controller to have a pause button.
Yeah, that's right. So this was an innovation that it really took a long time to get to this point. Like, I think that the 5200 came out in 1982, and up until then, if you were playing a game and you needed a bathroom break or you needed a food break,
yeah,
you were into it and that was it. But they came up with a pause control on here, and that's stuck around until this day.
And it's interesting to note that before they came up with the pause for the 5200, for the 2600, they had a color cycling system so that if you did have to leave, it wouldn't burn the image into your CRT television, an old tube television.
Yeah.
So that as rudimentary as this is, Atari was really pushing the boundaries of something that had never been explored before.
Yeah, that's right. This color cycling thing, I think, can be a source of confusion for people too, because you can plug in your 2600, and if you put in a game of combat, you see all these different lights and different colors, and you're thinking, okay, like what's going on here?
Yeah, and essentially it was there to save your television.
Yeah, that's right. I think a lot of times too, when people play these older games, like they don't really know what to expect as well, because like nowadays when we play modern games, they have a linearity. You know, you're completing a story.
Correct.
You're trying to accomplish something. And a lot of these games, really, it's all about points. It's all about high scores.
Yeah, high scores. Much like the arcades at the time were all like high scores. There are a couple of games that are really kind of pushing the boundaries of story, like the Adventure series.
Yeah, the Indiana Jones.
Yes.
Or even E.T., which I know lots of people have problems with, but that game actually can be beaten, and you know it was forward thinking in that way. Or Raiders of the Lost Ark on 2600.
The Raiders of the Lost Ark is great. You needed 2 controllers to play it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So yeah, it's a really interesting and creative time in video game history.
And not only that, they manufactured them because inside these machines, most of them have just little rudimentary boards, but they made them to look like a piece of furniture. They have wood paneling, or they're so on and so forth to really fit your home aesthetic. And at the time period, in the late 70s and early 80s, most people's CRT televisions were kind of like a piece of furniture.
It was.
They were big wooden, pieces of furniture. And so they kind of manufactured them with the aesthetic that they would fit right in.
Yeah, the wood grain is everywhere on this table. You know, you've got your 3 out of the 5 systems we have here is wood grain, and that would have fit in a late 70s home.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Another thing too about playing these things, which is very different from the way we play games now, is nowadays we have our controllers and that's it. You know, the console sits in the living room display, and you don't even have to touch it. You hit a button on your controller and you power on your system. With these consoles, you bring them to you.
That's correct. Like all these switches here, did things with in-game functionality.
Yeah,
you needed to sit next to the console.
And when you look at the controllers, I mean, this is not long. Like by the standards of today. I mean, for one thing, today we have wireless controllers.
Yeah.
But you know, these are not long, and they didn't need to be because the idea was that you'd bring this thing, you know, right up next to your lap and play it.
Yeah, and I mean there are add-ons and stuff like the trackball for the ColecoVision, and which is the size of the system.
It's enormous.
Yeah, but they were really trying to create like the paddle here. Like this was really trying to recreate a spinner in an arcade. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I feel like that's a pretty good overview of this generation. I think it's a really interesting start for having video game consoles in the home, and then you know things change significantly from there. So.
Absolutely. I mean, it created laws that didn't exist anymore. It pushed boundaries. Lawsuits happened. I mean,
there were a lot of lawsuits.
There was a lot of lawsuits. This generation really pushed the technology into what we experience today in our homes.
And some of this stuff has gone, and some of it has continued. But you know, it's definitely a great generation to revisit because really this is where things, you know, really started.
Yeah.